Life is full of all sorts of twists and turns. We all have good days, and we also have days that feel like we are at our worst. Lydia's life was full of twists and turns, and she faced a lot of challenges, but through her perseverance and dedication, she was able to pull through and live her life satisfied and happy. Welcome everyone. Before we unfurl today's inspiring story, we'd love it if you could give this video a thumbs up and also hit that subscribe and notification button so that you won't miss out on any of our content or more amazing stories like this one. Lydia Fairchild had a rough start to her motherhood story. She became pregnant when she was 21 years old, and even before the baby was born, her husband decided to split up with her. She was forced to take care of the child on her own, despite all odds and the on and off relationship with her husband. She somehow managed to give birth and raise her kids. Things took a turn for the worst as she was unemployed and was struggling to make ends meet. She worked odd jobs here and there to provide for her firstborn, and somehow she managed to barely scrape by. The on and off relationship with her husband only made things worse for her, as she got pregnant with her second child right exactly after 1 year of giving birth to her first. Heavily pregnant without no one or nowhere to turn to, she made the life-changing decision of social welfare. But right after she got the initial documents done and settled, she fell into more trouble as the police were knocking at her door for unknown reasons. She was blatantly blamed for fraudulent criminal misconduct, and her dreams of providing her children a better life was quickly flashed before her eyes and was turned into a nightmare. Things went the opposite way for Lydia due to the fact that the DNA tests that she provided for the welfare department came out without any traces of her own DNA to match that of her children. The Department of Social Services called Fairchild and advised her to come in right away. What Fairchild thought was a normal gathering with the social specialist transformed into a cross-examination. The pleased mother was unexpectedly a criminal suspect. As I plunked down, they came up and shut the entryway. And they just returned and just began penetrating me with questions like, "Who are you?" Fairchild said. The DNA test results tested all that she thought about her family. Indeed, her sweetheart was the dad of the kids. And truly, they were totally related, as indicated by the DNA, aside from Fairchild. She was told she wasn't the mother. Fairchild was sure an error more likely than not had been made, yet she reviewed a social laborer saying to her, "Probably not. DNA is 100% secure and it doesn't lie." Fairchild was not just denied government help for her small kids, she was presently associated with conceivably going about as a paid proxy mother and submitting government assistance extortion. She was at risk for having her children removed for good. Fairchild said before she left, the social specialist advised her, "You know, we're ready to come get your children whenever." Fairchild started to freeze. She realized that they were her children, so she hurried back home to look for photographs of her pregnancy and discovered her kids' introduction to the World Testaments. She disclosed to her folks, who couldn't accept the test outcomes. I thought she was kidding, yet then she began crying on the telephone. I said, "Goodness, it must be an error. I was there when the children were conceived. I saw them come out. I held them in my arms, you know?" said Fairchild's mom, Carol Fairchild. I nearly went crazy inside. I was unable to envision why, if this could occur. "My little girl isn't a liar," said Fairchild's dad, Rod Fairchild. Fairchild called her obstetrician, Dr. Leonard Dryback. He was there for all the births and guaranteed Fairchild had vouched for her in court. I would have revealed to them that she unquestionably had these 3 children, and that they were hers, and that I don't have the foggiest idea what's up with the DNA testing. Yet, I realized that she had the children, Dryback said. However, none of that appeared to issue, since DNA tests were viewed as reliable, the best quality level in court. DNA indicated that Fairchild's heredity cosmetics didn't coordinate that of her youngsters. To take out any opportunity of human mistake, new DNA tests were requested from various labs. It was a horrifying standby. However, the outcomes were the equivalent. The youngsters weren't hers. Fairchild realized that she was near losing her children. After 3 court hearings, she said the adjudicator took a gander at her and advised her to discover a legal advisor. It was another daunting struggle in the courts. The vast majority of the lawyers Fairchild went to were not ready to battle DNA proof. Lawyer Alan Tyndall at last consented to take the case. However, he examined her widely concerning association with the youngsters. "These aren't your sister's kids? These aren't your siblings' children? You didn't steal these kids from anybody." Tyndall said that after he saw how unyielding Fairchild's responses were, he had chosen to trust her. Be that as it may, Fairchild and her family stayed terrified, dreading to see a social service or child support cop at their doorstep at any second. So they made arrangements to conceal the kids from specialists. Getting that summons via the post office to go to court that they were attempting to take my children from me, my stomach just went into a huge bunch. I just began crying, and I called my family, and I held my children and was terrified, Fairchild said. I'd sit and eat with my children and simply break out crying. They would simply see me like, "What's going on, Mom?" They'd come and hug me, and I was unable to disclose it to them, since I didn't comprehend what was going on, Fairchild clarified. Fairchild was in a predicament, facing an administration that ideally she was at any rate a cheat, with no proof to prove herself and logical proof weighing against her. However, at that point she got a break. The nation over. There was another lady with DNA that didn't coordinate her children's. Yet, for this situation, the specialist had broken the clinical secret. In Boston, Karen Keegan had gotten a chilling call from her PCP. It came during an exceptionally troublesome time in her life, similarly as she required a kidney relocate. Keegan reviewed what the specialist said to her. "Mrs. Keegan, we have some bizarre news to answer to you. We've never had this occur, yet your kids don't match your DNA." That disclosure came after her relatives had their blood tried for similarity, any from a mother and father, or to acquire qualities from both the mother and the father. For Keegan's situation, it created the impression that her 2 young men hadn't acquired any of her DNA, said Dr. Lynn Ull, a pathologist and specialist of bonding medication at Beth Israel Diakoness Medical Center in Boston. They weren't hers, so we scratched our heads and stated, "This is truly unordinary. How might this be?" Boston specialists asked Keegan the very kind of inquiries that had been requested from Fairchild in Washington. They asked Keegan where her 2 children had come from, since their hereditary code was not equivalent to hers. They needed to know the name of the clinic where my kids were conceived. They had some different musings, as maybe this was some sort of in vitro preparation, or much more terrible, that this lady could very well not be totally coming clean or even be mentally uneven here and there, Keegan said. Keegan's PCPs explored the case further. It was a clinical secret. Absolutely, there were people whom we showed the story to who stated, "There should be a carefully guarded secret." All said. Specialists took DNA tests from everywhere in Keegan's body. They tried her blood, her hair, and cleaned her mouth. As yet, nothing coordinated her children's DNA. Be that as it may, Keegan had another thought. Keegan disclosed to Ull that she had had a thyroid knob eliminated some time back. After a broad hunt, specialists found an example of her thyroid tissue saved in a close-by lab in the Boston zone. As indicated by Ull, this bit of tissue was the best way of settling the clinical secret. The DNA that would coordinate her children's DNA might have been any place in Keegan's body, yet her thyroid was the place where she coordinated her children's hereditary code. The secret was tackled. As it were, Keegan was her own twin. In her blood, she was one individual, yet in different tissues, she had proof of being a combination of 2 people, Ull said. It's a very unique and rare condition called chimerism, with just 30 archived cases around the world. In Greek folklore, chimera signifies a beast, part goat, part lion, part snake. In human science, a chimera is a creature with, in any event, 2 hereditary particular sorts of shells, or, at the end of the day, somebody intended to be a twin. However, while in the mother's belly, 2 treated eggs combine, turning out to be one baby that conveys 2 unmistakable hereditary codes, 2 separate strands of DNA. The twin is imperceptible, however, for fabrications, the twin lives infinitesimally inside the body as DNA. At the point where all revealed to Keegan she was her own twin, Keegan said she was stunned. You wouldn't envision that that could even be conceivable. As yet, fighting to keep children. However, what did this new revelation mean for Lydia Fairchild, the lady living the nation over who'd been battling to keep her youngsters? The state was still so dubious of Fairchild that when she brought forth another youngster, a court official remained in the conveyance space to observe a prompt DNA test. They took DNA from the child and myself at that moment, after birth, and it returned that it is highly unlikely, conceivable, that the infant is mine, Fairchild said. Despite the fact that they'd seen the birth, authorities accepted she was going about as a substitute, conceivably bearing a kid for cash. Fairchild's lawyer was resolved to address the secret. That is the point at which he ran over Keegan's figment story in the New England Journal of Medicine. I requested that the adjudicator delay the case until these tests should be possible, Tyndale said. After the tests were done, there was confirmation that Fairchild was her own twin too. The adjudicator at last trusted Fairchild was the natural mother of her youngsters and excused the case. I most likely wouldn't have my children today on the off chance that they didn't find her circumstance. They wouldn't have referred to try and think about me as a fabrication, Fairchild said. Without Keegan, Fairchild said she may have lost her family for eternity. And with that, it brings us to the end of today's video. We hope that y'all enjoyed this inspirational and medical marvel of a life story. And again, if you enjoyed the video, please do like, comment, and share. Subscribe, and see you next time.